So my name is Rachael Risdale. I'm one of the marketing managers here at Bath Rugby.
Oh, awesome. Thank you very much for making your time to come speak to us.
Pleasure.
Mental health, what does that mean to you?
So mental health for me is kind of everything from, I guess, my psychological and emotional well-being, how I think, act, feel, the choices I make, the way I respond to situations, I guess positive or negative.
The whole scale?
The whole scale.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's probably something like Lucette and us are really trying to push forward and promote. It's not the connotation that has to be a negative thing instantaneously.
No. Yeah, definitely.
Yourself, have you ever been through any mental health challenging situations? If so, how did you deal with that, cope with that?
Yeah, so I struggle with PTSD from childhood trauma. So actually for me, everyday life situations can be tough. I can kind of get triggered by just like a noisy environment, or kind of, often for me it's the little things that can really impact then kind of my mental health, so I guess tip to the negative side. And I guess the way I've deal with it is to really understand like my triggers, to understand what keeps me more balanced. So whether that's kind of exercise, seeing friends, and I'm very lucky to have a incredibly supportive network around me.
Oh, that's thank you very much for opening up about that. When you speak to your network, or how did you first approach it with your network when you said actually,
So I definitely struggled to like open up. I've not always been very good at articulating my feelings. I think I've often felt like my emotions were just so big, and it was really hard to. You don't want to upset those closest to you, do you? You don't. Often you probably hold back because you think, oh, actually, me being really honest about how I'm feeling might offend people. It might upset people, and people may perceive you in a different way.
You also make yourself very vulnerable, don't you? Yeah.
Very vulnerable. I've even been honest with colleagues at work, which obviously was quite scary because then you don't want to think that you'll be treated differently.
Yeah.
But I think the way I very much did it in probably kind of small chunks. I started to talk a bit more openly about how I was feeling, and I might just kind of I kind of tended to drip feed it a little bit so that I guess it wasn't too much for me, and I guess too much for someone else to handle as well.
Were you selective with the first people you chose to speak to?
Certainly people I just felt I really trusted, and who were, would just listen to me and would just listen and validate my emotions, wouldn't go into a full, okay, this is what we think you should do, and because actually sometimes you just need someone to listen.
Yeah, just need to be able to vent. You don't need that advice necessarily right there.
No, you might just need a hug.
Yeah, you might need a hug. And how were they when you opened up? How were they? How were the responses?
Yeah, really positive. Probably really lucky in that way that I've had very positive experiences from opening up. Not necessarily everyone. I think generation can be difficult with that one, and probably certain people I tried to open up to, they didn't know how to respond or didn't know how to handle it. But overall, really positive, just actually, and were really open to listen and to understand what I needed from them.
Okay. Should we talk about that, the generation bit? Do you want to elaborate a little bit more on that?
So I think certainly the younger generation probably are much more, or from my experience at least, much more open to understanding, and there probably is less of a stigma around it with the younger generation. I think some of the older generation, certainly when I've reached out to older members of family, I think probably closed off a little bit, or didn't know how to respond.
It's a little more foreign and a bit of a taboo kind of.
Definitely, yeah. But they've listened and learned.
Oh, nice. So, if you had to relate it back to like the rugby community itself, how do you think the view and the image and the thought process behind mental health and mental health illness and well-being and mental fitness, do you think there's been a change in the last couple of years?
I think definitely. Certainly there's been a lot of people who have been, in very public positions have been really open and honest. I think, the likes of Johnny Wilkinson, Danny Cipriani being so open and honest about their own battles and struggles. I think there's no doubt that will have done good, and will have helped break the stigma, and I think will have just shown that ill mental health doesn't discriminate, and actually it can impact anyone from all walks of life. Probably it's quite easy to look at a professional athlete and think, oh, they've got it easy, they've got their dream job or they've got all this support around them, and it doesn't mean that that's the case, and it doesn't mean that they're just every day they wake up and feel on top of the world. Actually, they'll have their down days too.
Their own challenges.
And their own challenges, and I think that's probably been massive for then the rugby community. And I think, so many sports psychologists are doing such amazing work within teams to educate that, and I think it's allowed the conversation around it to really change and to really open up.
Oh, thank you. Loose heads itself, maybe if we just focus a little bit on loose heads, what do you think the impact that loose heads is trying to promote will have within the rugby community and potentially even wider?
So I first heard about loose heads from Carol Brayley's Instagram, and
Yeah.
I thought, quite a while ago now, and I thought it was just great having a professional athlete be open.
Yeah.
And then really kind of breaks down those walls and shows that it kind of allows, I guess, people to relate and to connect with mental health and understand that you've kind of got it in terms of the positive and negative. It's not just one connotation.
Yeah.
And it's more of a sliding scale.
Yeah.
And actually, I think having
it's normal, right?
And it's normal.
Yeah.
It's totally normal, and having having that connection to rugby and to athletes, I think, is probably really powerful, because it's refreshing to people to see, certainly like young boys and girls, then seeing that and seeing it being talked about openly. I would hope it allows them to relate and understand that all walks of life, they'll have their different challenges, and you're not alone.
Yeah, well, 100%. Awesome. Advice. Do you have any advice for anybody else that might be not necessarily knowing where to turn, how to approach a situation, might not be feeling like super anxious, but just like a little bit down from, again, the whole scale, but just feel like they need to reach out a little bit? Do you have any advice in regards to like maybe how they should approach a situation?
Yeah, so we, as a kind of friendship group, we did this thing. We kind of did this little tactic where we would have this cue of, if you're having a bit of a down day, you would text to say like, oh, I've burnt my toast this morning. And it was just a really small thing. But actually something like that can just really, if you're not feeling great, the small thing just really, then it's really hard to then find any good in the day. It can just almost like tip your day to the negative side.
Yeah.
And so we would have this little thing where you could just send that, and it might just mean that actually you just needed someone to be a bit more gentle with you that day, or you needed someone to reach out, or you needed a hug, or you needed someone just to have a listen. And I think probably finding those you can really trust and can really rely on, having those smaller cues, I think just shows that you haven't got to sit down and say, oh my gosh, this is everything I'm feeling right now, because that might feel really scary, and it might be really hard to be that vulnerable, but actually
a bit overwhelming as well, potentially.
A bit overwhelming, and actually you might be thinking, gosh, how am I going to feel after doing that? Am I going to feel better? Am I not? So
and I don't actually want to put myself out there for that. I just want to let people know, or let certain selected people know.
So I think that was really good. That certainly have really helped some people in my kind of closer circles to allow them to open up a little bit. And I think, the advice I would say is probably find someone you can trust, and maybe even just give them a heads up. And that can be a text. It doesn't have to be you meet up and you sit down, because some people will find face-to-face really difficult. And actually maybe just sending a text to say, been having some heavy feelings at the moment, and actually can I use you as someone to just give and say it. Might come in bite-sized chunks, it doesn't have to all come in one go. And maybe, they just say, this is the colour I'm feeling, today I'm feeling murky grey, and then maybe the next day they're feeling sunny yellow. But it's having someone you can just, I think it's just thinking it's baby steps. You don't have to suddenly be totally okay about talking about your feelings and being really open and honest, because I think that's a bigger step to take.